Today, I'm directing the United States Trade Representative to examine China's policies, practices, and actions with regard to the forced transfers of American technology and the theft of American intellectual property.
Well, the Trump presidency is unique. I haven't seen one like it. I don't think the American people have either, and probably not the Chinese people. And now they're beginning to take measures against China. So what can be done about it by people like us?
克, which means to overcome, or to conquer, and 文. And that's the character for literature, or the arts. 克文, conqueror of the classics. Any of you guys called Kevin?
陆克文曾经的澳大利亚总理及外交部长，第一个能说流利中文的前西方国家领导人。2013年，他退出澳洲政坛，随后出任美国亚洲协会政策研究所主席。2017年下半年，特朗普政府接连对中国进行贸易调查。中国通陆克文又会如何判断未来中美经贸走向？
It's so nice you have a museum in your building. Do you have like a typical day at Acer Society?
No, I don't actually. Like this morning I was on Bloomberg television talking about Korean Peninsula, but also about Akuhan Janjang Danda. And then I've got to get home and feed the cat. Cats, we got 2 of them. And so... Yeah. And we call them, the cats' names are Mei Mei and Qing Qing.
Oh, they have Chinese names.
Yeah. So they're named after Song Meiling, Song Jingling, but we don't have a Song Ailing.
Did you have a pet when you were young?
Yeah. I grew up on a farm, and so we had hundreds of pets. They were all over the place. But I certainly had cats and dogs. I also had a horse, and so as a kid growing up, so I used to go riding quite a lot.
Talking about how you grew up, I really admire your mom. I think she's very determined woman, and she makes some tough decisions at the right time. What did home mean to you when you were very young? And what kind of role does your mother play in your life?
I think in the deepest part of the mind of a child, a home equals security, and equals safety, and it equals love. Because outside the home, you don't know whether you're going to be safe, you don't know whether you're going to be secure, you don't know whether you're going to be loved. Whereas within the home, those things are unconditional. So that for me is the recollection I have, particularly of my mother. My father died when I was about 11. He had an accident. So I was brought up by my mother. And so we had no money. And so she had to train as a nurse, a 护士. And she was always putting her first priority with care for the kids, the education of the kids, and the kids' future. She was a good Confucian mother.
That's my mum. Anyone here ever listen to what their mum told them to do? Anyone ever do what their mum told them to do? I rarely did. But what my mum said to me was, one day she handed me a newspaper, a headline which said, "Here we have a huge change. And that change is China entering the United Nations." 1971. I had just turned 14 years of age, and she handed me this headline. And she said, "Understand this, learn this, because it's going to affect your future." So being a very good student of history, I decided that the best thing for me to do was, in fact, to go off and learn Chinese.
Several decades ago, when you were still a 小路, not a 老路, when you were young, you were in China, and you met some Chinese like political and business leaders. And now you met a new generation of Chinese business leaders. What do you see in these Chinese entrepreneurs?
What I discover in China each time I go is a greater sense of creativity. And that is young entrepreneurs, middle-aged entrepreneurs, thinking in new ways about how to build a business. It's not just about technology. It's not just about new innovations. It's also about how you deliver services to the Chinese domestic market and then to the international market. So this is a good development. It takes quite a lot of time, but I think China's making some progress. But it's important for these young entrepreneurs to also understand what the global market is like. And it's sometimes quite different to the Chinese domestic market.
Back to like 30 years ago, we cannot imagine a Chinese businessman to speak on an international stage, but now we have like Jack Ma and others. You and Jack Ma are good friends, so what do you talk about usually when you are together with him? Does he advise your daughter on how to do business?
I don't think so. Well, I think Jack Ma has done a great job in building a business out of nothing. It takes a lot of enterprise to have nothing and then to build something and then to build something very big. And that's why I appreciate Jack's work. Also, he's a human being. He tells a story about when he first learned to speak English, and he had a pen friend in Australia. And so he went and stayed with his pen friend, I think, for several months in Newcastle. And that really helped him with his English. But the interesting thing is that since that time, every year, Jack invites that man's family to Hangzhou for a week's holiday. And he's done that ever since he's had the money to do it.
Yeah.
So I think that displays a very good set of Confucian values.
And now he has a scholarship dedicated to the family.
Yeah.
Named by the family. I know your daughter is doing business in China. When he went there, do you give her advice on how to do business? What did you tell her?
No, absolutely not, because I'm not a businessman. And my wife is. She's very smart, much smarter than I am. And she has developed a business since she was in her 20s. So my wife and my daughter, they talk business all the time. And my wife has spent a long time living in China. So the secret of the brains in our family is the women, okay? Not the guys like me.
In terms of how to deal with Chinese people, what do you tell? Because I saw your daughter is doing very good in China, actually. So maybe she learned something from you.
No, she does it all herself. I've never approved a single script of hers. In dealing with Chinese people, I mean, our simple approach as a family has always been just be very friendly, very polite, and just be honest, which is, we're good at this product is fine, this approach is okay, this policy is a good policy, in the case of governments. Because trust is a very rare thing, and you cannot abuse trust. So the only thing I've ever said to my daughter is, you must look after your customers, because they put some trust in you, and therefore you've got to return that trust.
I know you're a good biker. You ride a 飞鸽自行车 back in like 1984.
Yeah, I always had my own flying pigeon, and flying pigeons were very good, very simple, but nothing could ever destroy them.
At that time, pigeon is still a luxury in China, but now you can see bicycles, like sharing bicycles everywhere. So China witnessed a lot of changes. What do you think is the most significant change?
I think one of the smartest things that the Beijing municipal government has done is the bicycle system recently. What's Beijing got as a big advantage? It's flat, and so you can get around the city on a bike pretty easily. And so what I've noticed is this big phase, which is when I first went to Beijing in 1984, everyone rode bicycles. And then when I went back to China as Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, the Member of Parliament, practically nobody rode bicycles anymore. And now the bicycles are coming back. So for the environment, it's a great thing.
So you witness the biggest change in China is that?
Well, the Chinese people have worked out that you cannot just exploit the environment without consequences. And the government and the people have worked out that if you do that, then it just destroys people's health. So you see a range of measures, from climate change to cleaning up river systems and these sort of measures, bicycles. Because, and the move to electric cars will be very important as well. If everyone in China was to own a petroleum-based motor vehicle, 1.4 billion of them, frankly, I think you'd strangle China to death. And so moving to electric cars, bicycles, these sorts of practical measures, I think is the way to go.
You see that bloke? He's French. His name's Napoleon. A couple of hundred years ago, he made this extraordinary projection. China is a sleeping lion, and when she awakes, the world will shake. China is today not just woken up. China has stood up, and China is on the march, and the question for us all is, where will China go, and how do we engage this giant of the 21st century? If you start looking at the numbers, they start to confront you in a big way. It's projected that China will become, by whichever measure, PPP, market exchange rates, the largest economy in the world over the course of the decade ahead. They're already the largest trading nation, already the largest exporting nation, already the largest manufacturing nation, and they're also the biggest emitters of carbon in the world.
You once said that there's always something new to learn about China. What's your latest new thoughts on China?
I think my latest new thoughts on China is to see more and more evidence of China's self-confidence in the world. You read books about it and you read articles about it, but if you know as many Chinese people as I do, 比较多，不就是在网络是直接的，接触，他们对那个全世界的自信 self-confidence 越来越大。And I see this in people's individual behavior, their corporate behavior, the political behavior of the Chinese government and state. So I think what I see most is this growing self-confidence as China, having opened the doors in 1978, having reformed the economy through the 80s and 90s, and then having 走出去 after that. And then 10 or 15 years after 走出去, there is a increasing level of maturity about China's understanding of the world. It's not perfect, but what I see is a greater, more mature reflection of what the world is like, and a greater sense of comfort in working in the world. Like in your job, you wouldn't be doing this in New York 20 years ago, would you?
True.
Okay, so you're an example of this.
What do you think the confidence come from? Because for a long time, Western scholars always think that Chinese people regard themselves as a victim instead of very confident in the world stage.
I think...
is it because of economy or culture or something else?
Well, I think one of the good things about Chinese culture is you have this whole emphasis on 谦虚, modesty and humility. This is not often the biggest strength in the United States. You know that, I know that, and hopefully the Americans won't hear this, so that'll be fine. But the great advantage that China has, I think there is an instinctive modesty about the culture and about behavior, and deferring to people. I think this is a good thing. Secondly, I think that is a good skill for understanding the world. If you go out into the world and your attitude is purely 100% 自大, that doesn't help understand the world. You just create enemies that way. And so I think learning to take your time and to patiently understand the world is a very fruitful exercise, although it takes time. The third thing is just a very practical thing, which is the doors were shut for a long time, and then they opened. And now tens of millions of Chinese have gone out into the world. Probably now hundreds of millions, I'm not sure, either short-term or long-term. So the world is less of a mystery to the people of China. And then, of course, there's the point that you referred to, which is that China is now wealthier and as a country more powerful. The Chinese reformers of the late Qing dynasty dreamt of wealth and power. If you look at the traditional reformers of Yan Fu and Tan Tong and Liang Qichao and that whole period, even Kang Youwei, in the 1890s, prior to the Xinhai Geming, they always dreamt of how China could obtain wealth and power to deal with 的洋人，鸦片战争等等。So that was in the 1890s. 100 years later, wealth and power has arrived. And so I think Chinese people sense that, and that also enables them to be more confident in the world. Even though, as you know and I know, China still has stacks of problems. Chinese leadership knows that as well.
You travel to China a lot of times, and now you live in New York, so you know China, you know U.S. very well. In the past, we have a lot of people who work on the China-U.S. relationship very well, like Dr. Kissinger, like Mr. Paulson. What did you learn from their experience?
I think with Henry Kissinger, who I know very well, what Henry has concluded a long time ago is, first, a country as old as China does not change its fundamental views of the world quickly or easily. I mean, you've had a philosophical system and a system of language which is now, 4,000 years old, 3,000 to 4,000 years old. And so, as a result, you have a deeply entrenched view of the world and a view of yourself. There are no other countries like that. There are no other countries which are big modern countries which are simultaneously ancient countries. Perhaps Iran or Persia comes closest in terms of continuity. So that's the one thing which Henry emphasizes. I think the second thing is if you're going to try and help US-China relations, it's best to do it quietly. It's a very good principle. It's very easy in politics and in international relations to 说大话。说大话很容易，但是最困难的一件事就是解决好具体的问题，后来不说。That, I think, is a very clever approach from Henry. As for Hank, who I know as well, and so he has had a different perspective to Henry's, who has always been a foreign policy, national security guy. But what Hank has seen is the evolution of the Chinese entrepreneurial mind. And so he is constantly encouraged by what China has achieved in its economy. And so I listen to both of them a lot, and I'm privileged to count both of them as friends.
Just now you mentioned Paulson's difference from Dr. Kissinger. What's your difference from them two?
I'm an Australian. That's a pretty obvious difference. And I have no illusions about my importance in the world. At the end of the day, I am a former Prime Minister of one G20 country. These guys were respectively Secretary of State and Secretary of the Treasury for the largest country in the world. And so these guys carry a lot of influence. So I don't see myself in their league at all.
You once joke about Australians are good at bring the drinks. You provide a suggestion, go and get a drink. Just as you mentioned, China has a long history, and the U.S. is the most powerful country in the world. So how do you make sure that your suggestions are more likely to be taken and more operational?
Well, at the end of the day, you can't guarantee that, because governments are governments. I have run my own government in the past, and governments ultimately make up their own minds. I think the key to successfully advising a government is to explain carefully your understanding of the interests of China and the interests of the United States. The interests of China as seen through Chinese eyes, but interestingly, the interests of China as seen through American eyes. And sometimes they're not the same thing. And by the same logic, it's important to explain to the Chinese American interests as the Americans see them. So I think half the battle is in removing this problem of perceptions. Some of them are objective difficulties where it's not a problem of language and culture.
I agree with you that you are in a great place to talk to both sides in a way, but you're
Sometimes.
But you're not a Chinese, not America.
You can see it. 100%大鼻子，不算是中国人。
Have you ever come across a situation where you have like an outsider dilemma or like a trust crisis?
The outsider dilemma. Well, Australians generally have an outsider dilemma because we're the only Western country in Asia. And so we're kind of used to this outsider dilemma. Well, there's New Zealand too. But as a result, we're used to being the odd man out or the odd man in, if you know what I mean. I think the key, there's one advantage in being an Australian in Asia relative to other Westerners. And that is, in our region, the Asia-Pacific region, we recognise the fact that there are much bigger, more powerful, and certainly more ancient cultures and civilizations than ours. Therefore, that places a burden of responsibility on us to understand these other cultures, to understand China from the inside, to understand Japan from the inside, as opposed to just thinking that these are expressions of Western thinking. The West is a relatively new idea, last 500 years. Most of these cultures and civilizations have been around for 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 plus. So as Australians, I can't say that we are naturally Qianshu, but we understand that we are new kids on the block, and we understand that we are smaller kids on the block. So therefore we make it our business to understand great powers, whether it's the Americans or you guys. So does that give us an advantage? Sometimes. Is that an outsider's dilemma? I think it's an outsider's advantage, actually.
Let's talk about individual case. For example, recently Donald Trump calls for China IP review, and we got the Chinese response. On this case, what do you think? What did you do? What are you going to do to help the two?
Well, the Trump presidency is unique. I haven't seen one like it. I don't think the American people have either, and probably not the Chinese people. Secondly, it's a deeply protectionist government. And they said that before they were elected. They're going to protect American industry against foreign firms, particularly Chinese firms. And since the election, they've done that. They announced the abolition of the TPP before they even started. And now they're beginning to take measures against China. So what can be done about it by people like us? The argument I always put is, never forget, all of us, how we have benefited from open trade and open investment rules. Asia, including China, 30 years ago, while not poor, was certainly not rich. The big thing that's changed it is the whole wealth that has come through open trade and investment between the countries of the region and between the region and the United States, between the region and Europe. So people often forget this, that in decades past, our part of the world was not all that prosperous. But it's prosperous now because of open lines of commerce and investment and trade and business and technology flows and capital flows. So that's the first thing we emphasize, which is, and the second thing we emphasize is, it's very easy to trigger a trade war, which becomes an investment war, which becomes an economic war. And once you do that, our collective wealth collapses. So what we try to do is just to emphasize these two basic truths in our dealings with the Chinese and with the Americans. Will we have an effect or not? I do not know. Because, as I said, this is a unique presidency.
So do you think protectionism or populism is only a short-term phenomenon or a beginning of a major, larger global trend?
My attitude is not one of making broad predictions, partly because I'm still, if you like, a political activist, which is I want to see changes in a positive direction. And so I believe it lies within the grasp of the Chinese government, the European governments, and the government of the United States to make the right decisions for the future, to keep economies open, to keep societies open, to keep markets open. Will they have the political resolve to do that? Well, that's the reason Macron was elected. And that's a reason why the far-right parties in the Netherlands were not elected. And that's why the far-right parties, even in Britain at the last general election, failed. In the United Kingdom Independence Party, UKIP. So you see, it's not just one trend towards protectionism. It's a very mixed trend. If you look at the opinion polling in Europe, it's fascinating. 77% of Europeans want to remain within the European Union. No, 77. 77%, 那是比较多嘛。And so the whole idea that concerns about cultural identity and protecting your culture equals closing the doors to global trade and investment is a false equation. In Europe, if you look at the opinion poll data carefully, 那是民意调查很清楚呢，一部分的那些因素都是我要保护我本人的我本地区的文化，与此同时呢，不一定等于保护我们的经济，或者采取那个保护主义方面的那个贸易措施。So it's a complex question. I think if policymakers can recognize the difference, we can protect our cultures, that's fine. But understand that our collective wealth lies still with a globalizing economy.
The future of US-China relations, the head says there's a way forward. The head says there is a policy framework, there's a common narrative, there's a mechanism through regular summitry to do these things and to make them better. But the heart must also find a way to reimagine the possibilities of the America-China relationship and the possibilities of China's future engagement in the world. Sometimes, folks, we just need to take a leap of faith, not quite knowing where we might land.
Is that your mission or your core value?
No, I think if I've got a core mission or a core value, it's how can you bring about a set of circumstances where political leaders around the world change their thinking about the inevitability of conflict. Because in the back of the mind of most political leaders is a view that history teaches us that conflict is inevitable. So how can you change that? And that for me is a question of deep national psychology. So my mission is how do you explain at a practical level how you can avoid conflict, but also through the evolution of what I describe as common values, which transcend all civilizational traditions, all religious traditions, which reminds us that we're just all human beings. By the way, if you cut that, I bleed the same as you. 就是人类梦。
I think it's time across the world we were able to think also of something we might also call a dream for all humankind. A dream for all humankind. Because if we do that, we might just change the way that we think about each other.